Hi. First, a little on my background, because I've kind of moved around from one subject to another. My degrees are from Cornell and Harvard in biology, and most of my work was on how animals work and the physiology of animals. So when I recently began to get sick, it turns out the food that I was eating and the food that I wasn't eating. I was fortunate to have a terrific doctor 13 years ago who told me I really needed a lot of vitamin B12. And that was the beginning of my odyssey. A lot of people, as you just said, have gotten sick, have gotten hospitalized. And I think that in order to understand what's really happened, not from the governmental perspective, but from the biological perspective, we need to go back and review the history of food. So the history of food starts like this. Hunters-gatherers, and then the archaeologists make a big jump to agrarian, and there's nothing in between. Well, now they're figuring out that there's an awful lot in between that happened. I started to get to understand some of the traditional uses of food and the ways of gathering it. When I worked this summer on a book, which I published for the Mount Kearsarge Indian Museum, Bud Thompson, who is an old friend, asked me if I would prepare something that would enable people to enjoy the outdoors of the campus there in addition to the indoors part of the museum. And so Hazel Stark and I got together a 260-page book, making it so that anyone walking around their campus can identify the 160 kinds of plants that are around there, and also using quick links within the PDF file that we published it as, so that they could look up the ethnobotanical uses of all the plants. So, for example, you can learn that the American basswood was used for fiber. Well, that's one thing to read that. It's another thing to read that the Native Americans were able to take the fibers from the inside of the bark of the basswood and weave together a bowstring pulled on a 50-pound pull bow. We're so used to thinking in terms of the fibers that the colonists fought over, particularly linseed flax and so on. And of course, marijuana as well uses the fiber. And we're so spoiled with having nylon that we never really stop and think, fine, it's fine to make a bow, but how do you make the strings and the arrows and so on that are all necessary to go with it? Well, then I read just a month ago an article written by a European that shows that the migration of Homo sapiens out of Africa and up into eastern Turkey, and then westward through the Balkans to Germany and France to the Iberian Peninsula, was accompanied by a great deal of acorn gathering and eating. It wasn't just a happenstance thing. They really relied on acorns to get through the winter. So I started collecting acorns and trying to figure out how to get past the tannic acid that's in them. This was commonly told if you talk to John Brooks in Warner, who's a retired policeman there, and he'll tell you exactly. I've had cookies that he made out of acorn flour, and they're absolutely delicious. So what has all this got to do with this illness that we have now? Well, back in 1930, there was a dentist named Weston Price, and he made so much money putting in fillings and fixing people's teeth that he and his wife took 9 years to travel all around the world, seeking out indigenous cultures. He started with the Swiss. They went to the Hebrides, the fishermen in the Hebrides, writing down all the time exactly what they ate, as nearly as they could, and also photographing the mouths of the people. Now, one of the interesting things is that in all those 9 years, some 30 cultures that they looked at, every single person that was born to those cultures had plenty of room for all 32 teeth. How many people do you know that have room in their mouth for all 32 teeth? No wisdom teeth impacted or anything. It's just so interesting that all you have to do is eat the right stuff. So he documented exactly what all these different cultures were eating. And he published the book in 1939, the year I was born, which languished because he was a dentist and the doctors didn't really take it very seriously. But he found people that just lived on fish, the Hebrides, the Inuit lived on blubber and ate tremendous amounts of fat. They did not have, what he found out was not just that they didn't have cavities, but that they didn't have cancer, they didn't have tuberculosis, they didn't have all of the diseases that we just take for granted because we've been programmed to think that way. So here we are eating, well, he also compared brothers and sisters who had switched to what he called white man's food, which consisted mostly of less fat and more things like carbohydrates and white bread and so on. So at the conclusion of his book, he actually invented another vitamin that wasn't on the list. He had his own laboratory that could test vitamins, and he could tell the difference between vitamin D and vitamin A, which are oil-soluble vitamins that we now know are critical to a lot of things. So what has happened to us? We've been living with a recommendation of the FDA and the USDA to eat low-fat diets. The worst thing in the world. The trouble is that the way many of the animals are kept that we now call our meat, they're so badly treated and they're fed such bad food, particularly GMO foods, that these fats are not healthy, in fact. So a lot of people will say to me, oh, I switched to vegan diet and I feel so much better without the animal products. It's because you're eating the wrong animals. You know, you're eating animals that have been kept in prison, essentially, for their entire life. They've never taken a free step in their lives, like the pigs. So my wife and I started to switch about 5 years ago to organic foods. We buy most of our meat from Steve Normanton in Litchfield that raises grass-fed beef and chickens and so on. We are now members of the Temple Wilton Community Farm, which is the oldest CAS in America. They've been going for 32 years. And they also freeze the meat when they're finished with it. We also have been drinking raw milk for 5 years. And that's made a tremendous difference to us. We just don't get sick anymore. Our doctors, we don't even know, my wife doesn't even remember her doctor's name. So she's 62 and I'm 77. So when something goes wrong, I talk to people who know foods rather than the doctors. It's not the doctor's fault because the medical schools were built with pharmaceutical profits. So the medical schools are going to teach the doctor, when you see this symptom, you provide this thing to change the symptom. They've gotten away from the word causes. If you notice that when you talk to doctors, they talk about risk factors. Well, you know, being alive is a risk factor. You know, it's just another mumbo jumbo. So what this brings us up to is, why is the food that we're eating so bad for us? And one of the reasons is that they have taken a lot of the most important nutrients and removed them. There's a very good reason for that. If you look at the shelf life of an omega-6 oil compared to the shelf life of an omega-3 oil, there's a huge difference. The omega-3s go bad very quickly. So if you want a product that will last on the grocery shelf, and it doesn't matter when you sell it, which is what the industry has gravitated toward, just on a pure profit basis, you're going to get stuff that isn't necessarily the best for us as in terms of our health. The other thing is that the vitamins, as the government has recommended them, may not be in the best form that you can use. For example, vitamin B12, traditionally, if you buy some in Trader Joe's, it's a compound called cyanocobalamin, which you don't need to remember, but just remember that it's not methylcobalamin, which is what your body really needs and uses. And the same thing with folic acid. Folic acid is mandated to be an enrichment given to pregnant women because it helps to prevent developmental problems in the mouth and the spine. But folic acid is not the same as folate. It was named folate, which means leaf. It was named folate because you get it from green vegetables. So if you look at the actual folate that's coming from green vegetables, it's actually methylfolate. It's actually 5-hydroxymethylfolate, but let's not mince words. And if you take 5-hydroxymethylfolate, it turns out your methylation system starts to work again. So if you have, I just was reviewing last week, a long 3-hour lecture by a man who's figured out what the complex is that leads to chronic fatigue syndrome, which is a very, very difficult to diagnose thing. And it turns out that's really what I was getting when my doctor said you need B12. The two things that you need to solve the chronic fatigue syndrome, and it may take 6 to 8 months for you to get over it, are folate, the real folate, not folic acid, 200 micrograms a day, and B12 in great excess, particularly B12, probably 2 milligrams a day, which is much more than you need. But these are water-soluble vitamins that if you have too much will be flushed out pretty quickly without any damage. Fish oil, every single day. You should be taking fish oil in order to provide not only the omega-3s, which are anti-inflammatory, but you need the vitamin A and D. And if you get them in the ratio with A being up and around 10 to 20,000 units, and D around 2 to 4,000 units, you'll find that you just don't get sick anymore when you follow these recipes. The concept of cancer. If you listen to doctors, the concept of cancer will be, they'll tell you that it's this invasive problem that your system has developed through cosmic rays or a carcinogen, like many of the poisons I'm going to talk about in a minute. And cancer is actually been figured out by my friend Stephanie Sennett that it is actually a reaction of the body to what is really wrong. Just like fever is a reaction to having little microorganisms running around in your blood that don't belong there. Cancer is a reaction to too much blood sugar. And the reason, Stephanie Sennett reasoned this all out and published it about 2 years ago. She said, the interesting thing is that when they try to fix cancer, it comes back in other ways. It's because the problem hasn't been fixed. It's because the cancer is a symptom of the problem. And if you think of cancer as your body trying to help you with the real problem, which is the tremendous amount of carbohydrates and blood sugar that we have, well, pre-diabetic. Almost everybody is to one degree or another pre-diabetic, even if you cut out sugar, just because some of the carbohydrates get metabolized so quickly that they raise your blood sugar and the insulin can't work to get it to go down again. So why do I say that cancer is trying to get rid of sugar? It's because the cancer cells, although they have functional mitochondria, that's the energy box, the furnace essentially in every cell. And the mitochondria are supposed to take sugar and break it down via the Krebs cycle. And the Krebs cycle essentially is a very efficient way of producing the energy that the cell needs, the ATP that the cell needs, from oxygen combined with the sugar. But what the cancer cells do is they use what's called anaerobic glycolysis. That's what you do when you're running on your 10th mile. And that's what you do when your body just can't deliver enough oxygen. In other words, it's a very inefficient but necessary way of getting rid of sugar. So that's what cancer cells are designed to do. They're designed to get rid of blood sugar in an inefficient way. Why? Because we have so much sugar in our diet. Okay? So what Stephanie is saying is, all you need to do is to do more like eat fats, eat proteins, not so much the carbohydrates. Of course we all have a sweet tooth. Of course we all like fruits that are ripe, that have that sugary flavor. But our system is simply not capable of handling the degree of purification and dosage that we're getting it now. Okay, now what about toxins? I happen to be fortunate enough to be employed by a giant farm in Hudson, New York, and my title there is science coordinator. The giant farm has something like 120 different fields, a total acreage of 2,300 acres. And it was converted 2 years ago from conventional agriculture, which I'll describe in just a second, to organic agriculture. The conventional agriculture means you simply replace what nutrients the plants have taken out, and the heck with the soil. That's putting it nicely. The soil of most farm fields, if you filter it in your hand, it's like powder. It'll go right through and essentially doesn't have any what is called tilt. The word tilt meaning that it has this quality which makes it good for roots and good for the microorganisms that support the roots. So here we have a parallel. Agriculture has done for soils what food has done for our internal gut. It has deprived it of the normal bacteria that live there and that function and that keep us healthy. And one of the main chemicals that's done that, you already mentioned, it's glyphosate. It's the active ingredient in Roundup. So how does this affect the plants? How does it affect the insects that are necessary and are pests on the plants? And how does it affect us? The pollinators, as has already been said, are tremendously important in terms of getting the flowers fertile so that the plants will produce fruit. Whether we call it a vegetable, like with tomatoes and squash, it's really a fruit. It's got seeds in it, and it's designed to reproduce the plant. So the pollinators, without the pollinators, you're not going to get the pollen, and you're not going to get the fruit. So our whole food source has been cut off from that. The pesticides, there's a lot of conflicting evidence, and I read in numerous papers about whether it's glyphosate or whether it's the neonicotinoids that are getting bees. The neonicotinoids kill the bees right off. The glyphosate causes them to lose their ability to taste sweetness. So in other words, they can't tell a drop of dew from the actual nectar in the plant. So again, that's going to disrupt the whole process that they use. But please know that the honeybee, Apis mellifera, is a European creature. We have thousands of normal species of bees that have been pollinating our plants and our vegetables since before the honeybee was imported. So although several friends of mine are beekeepers and I talk to them each week, they really don't know what it is that causes the problem. There's something called the CCD, the colony collapse disorder. Yeah, right, thanks. And that's augmented by this misbehavior of the bees as well. So it's a very confusing thing to try and track down exactly what's causing them to die. It is almost certainly causing the decrease in the monarch butterflies. I walk through, as an ecologist, I walk through fields of milkweeds every summer, and I don't see any larvae on them. So planting milkweed is not where it's really needed. Where it's needed is to get rid of these pesticides. So what is the news about glyphosate? Well, 3 weeks ago, I co-authored a paper with Stephanie Seneff and Wendy Morley and Mike Hannon on the glyphosate's contribution to ALS, the Lou Gehrig's disease. And it was a 55-page paper. And I'm telling you, we really went through the biochemistry from one end to the other. And here's the problem with glyphosate. We know that it kills off the microbiome in the gut. We know that it kills off the microbiome in the soil. What else could it do? Well, it seems to actually work by substituting itself for one of the essential amino acids. It's called glyphosate, which is short for N-methylphosphoryl glycine. The N-methyl just means it has a CH2 in it, and phosphoryl means it has a phosphate group on the end. But basically, it's the amino acid glycine, which is the simplest, smallest, and regular amino acid that we have among our deck of 20 amino acids to make all proteins. It turns out that glyphosate is actually substituting itself for glycine in the synthesis of critical proteins. A year ago, that wasn't known. This was figured out by Anthony Samso, who lives right down in Deerfield here. And he published it as a paper with Stephanie Seneff. And that was really the point of our ALS paper, is that all these enzymes, which turn out not to work, are because glyphosate has been included in the making of the protein. In other words, it's like, you know what a mutation is? A mutation is when the genes are actually changed so that the code calls for the wrong amino acid in the right place. That's one way, simple way to kind of put it. But glyphosate, it turns out, is doing that with most of our enzymes. And the trouble with that is not that the enzymes don't work, because you can always try again and put the real glycine in. It's because the enzyme becomes so alien to the human cells that the recycling process breaks down. In other words, in the cell, it builds up this concentration of these badly folded proteins with glyphosate in there instead of glycine. And that's the real threat. All through ecology, we have badly made proteins are building up with glyphosate contained in them that the cell doesn't know how to break down. That's why we see the main effect of glyphosate is on people that are aging. You're seeing all these degenerative diseases, from the brain degenerative to and neurological degenerative to the heart, the activity of the circulatory system, the liver, everything. It doesn't store glyphosate itself. That gets flushed out pretty quickly. I will tell you an amusing story that Anthony Samsel confided. When he was working for
I have a question.
Okay.
There are studies that test glyphosate in your urine and in people's bodies now. So is there a certain amount that they study that there's a certain amount that is staying in our body?
I think the half-life of glyphosate in the body is less than a week.
So that can cause a lot of harm to our bodies.
It can, but the problem is that Monsanto originally told us that what glyphosate does is it terminates the shikimate pathway. What is the shikimate pathway? That's the pathway by which plants and bacteria create the three of those amino acids that I was talking about that have phenolic rings in them. Tyrosine, tryptophan, and phenylalanine are the three. Just to give you an idea of the importance, tryptophan is the actual starting synthesis point for serotonin. So you hear a lot about serotonin because it enables people to get a good feeling about themselves. And if you don't have enough tryptophan, you're not ever going to be able to make any serotonin. So some of the people in the Weston Price Foundation actually believe that the violence that you see in the schools and so on, with the gun violence, originates with that lack of serotonin. Now, what do doctors do about that? They give you a drug called SSRI, serotonin reuptake inhibitor, or something like that. And that probably helps to some degree, but I happen to know some suicides that have resulted apparently from taking that very drug, so I would not touch them. So the summary is that glyphosate is not only bad for us in our waning years especially, but it's bad for the whole ecosystem, because this is going on in every little creature. It's still being sold by the millions of tons. Okay, other questions?